Welcome everyone. I'm actually pretty impressed that so many people turned up, because this is not a Cube Kettle session and this is also not live code on stage, but it's actually about a topic that is pretty important. At least that's what I believe, and luckily looks like I'm not the only one that believes that. It's about what doing when you have an MVP, when you have a pilot, wherever you got that from, be it your own incubator or maybe inside a small IT, or you bought it or you sourced it in, and how do you get it scaled up into a global IT organization. My name is Clemens Zucik. I'm the CTO of Boehringer Ingelheim. Boehringer Ingelheim is 130 years old. It's a 130-year-old pharmaceutical company, right? To give you a rough glimpse, 60,000 people, the IT, $1 billion IT, and we research pharmaceuticals, both for animal health and human welfare. So most people likely don't know us, and that's good that way, because if you know us too well, chances are that you have a very chronic disease, be it cardiovascular, or be it something with the lung, or be it diabetes. And all of those are obviously not really nice sicknesses to have. Luckily, or not so lucky, I have two roles. And that's important, because that's, I think, part of the story of how you do successful scale-up of MVPs. I'm the CTO of Boehringer Ingelheim, and I'm also head of engineering at our incubator called BIX, and more about that later. And over the next hour, I invite you to ask questions. If there is something where you think Clemens talks utterly bullshit, or I disagree, or you want to have something clarified, seriously, then just ask. Because at the very end, I'm not doing this for me. It's really to have an open dialogue, because more and more people and companies created their incubators, right? Created their MVPs, and now it's like, what now? So if you have ideas, if you have questions, really don't be shy to ask. I'll then just repeat your question so the camera can hear it, and also maybe the others in the room, and then we move on. So, digital innovation at Boehringer Ingelheim, right, is largely driven by a two-phase approach. On the left is really early stage innovation. And early stage innovation means for us, minimum viable product, prototype, pilot, disruptive, and beyond our core, potentially. Our core, as I said earlier, right, is the research and eventually cure of sickness, right, of illness. So beyond the core, maybe diagnostics, maybe e-commerce, maybe to get closer to a veterinarian. These are the topics that we do at BIX, and I'll talk about a couple of those topics later to give you a glimpse where these products are in which stage, right? And the second part is, how do you scale it, right? Delivering stuff at scale. Because at the very end, most of the MVPs that we do, before we hand them over, have anything from like 10 users all the way to 100. But in order for a product to really scale, eventually potentially generate revenue, right? Or help inside the organization, adjacent to a process, we talk about thousands, if not millions of users. And that's not what an incubator is built for, right? So, early stage innovation driven by BIX. BIX is our own incubator. We funded a startup 2.5 years ago. And where is this startup located? Guess what? It's not in Berlin. It's not in Boston. It's not in San Francisco. It's not in Tel Aviv. And it's not in Shanghai. Any other thoughts? And it's not in Austin. I can tell you, it's in Ingelheim. We actually run a startup with 60 people in Ingelheim on campus. And we had plenty of discussions. Shouldn't we go to Berlin? Shouldn't we go to, you pick the city name, right? And eventually, the board decided, no, you guys will stay on campus. You guys will get your own building. You guys will get your own refurb, whatever you want. You'll get it. But we want you to be close to the mother. And it's pretty simple why. We are headquartered in Ingelheim. We are 8,000 people just in Ingelheim. And we want the incubator to transform this company. And not just create something somewhere hundreds of miles away and try to hand it back into the organization. That's kind of step one of really successful failures, in my view. And it was plenty of long discussions. But it's actually the first one of the science and art, how to bring something from pilot stage to scale. On the other side, deliver at scale is global IT, right? Global IT, $1 billion IT, and more details later. And the trick to either screw it up or get it to work is actually that magic link. And that magic link we'll talk about. It's how do you ensure that a global IT organization and an incubator find a way to work with each other on whichever level, be it management, be it engineering, be it data science, or be it technology stack. So I talked today much around technology and culture. There is several other dimensions from behavior and whatnot. If you want, then come by afterwards and we can talk about that as well. So, the disrupt and fail engine in facts, and there's actually 2 real pictures of BIX. I'm not kidding you. Point being, we run pharmaceutical production on campus in Ingelheim, right? And for those that know chemical manufacturing is acids, it's heat, and it's blue men and women, of course, right? And we managed to actually build our own little fabric inside the campus called the BIX Hive with different ways of working. By now 60 people, and we hired those 60 people from more than 20 countries in the world. So we have people from Brazil all the way to India. And in order to get those 50 people, horizon roughly a year, it was more than 2,000 resumes. More than 2,000 applications that we went through. So whoever tells me it's impossible somewhere in the world to get talent, this is denying it. We got the talent. And we got actually pretty bright talent. Because that's the power of using a global brand. BIX was no global brand. BI is a global brand. World famous for cutting edge medicine. The trick was to actually make it work for technology. And about that also a little bit later. And of course, it's ideation people, it's Scrum masters, it's Agile mastery people, it's engineers. And out of the 20 engineers I hired for BIX, only 2 accepted a counter offer by Google. So then, after all, not too bad. So I think I got pretty smart people. We have UX designers, we have product designers, all that confined in the BIX Hive. And keep in mind, and that's important to know, especially if you come from a corporate IT background, these guys are kids and nerds, and they want to play. They want to play in their own little perfect sandbox. And if you don't give them the chance to play, they'll leave. The war for talent is on. That much I can tell you. Especially if you're somewhere close to Frankfurt, there is war for talent, if we like it or not. And it's damn hard to get good people. And their job is to build cutting-edge products. Minimum viable MVPs and pilots. Their job is not to run operations. And I remember the words of my former boss, now the CFO of Boehringer, said, Clemens, you can do there whatever you like, but if I catch you to build a second IT, we have an issue. And rightly so. That's not the job of BIX. And you guys remember when we built the Open Dev stack underneath. The key is these guys are an incubator. Their job is to build, to try, to fail, and to try again. If we give them easy things, that much I can tell you as well, they'll leave as well, because they just get bored out. And bore out is a very well-known syndrome, known at least for engineers and data scientists. They will just get bored and they'll leave. So it's also the trick and challenge for us to bring the right ideas into the game. And of course, they wear flip-flops and shorts, stereotype, here we come, as well as cool t-shirts. And I told you earlier, right, the campus is 100 years old. Very formal people, suit and whatnot, in contrary to shorts and flip-flops. And the first thing that we see now after 2 years is actually culture changing. Because if you have 50 people that go for lunch to the canteen in shorts and flip-flops and pretty cool BIX shirts, this is what drives transformation. This is what drives transformation into a global company. More of the fun culture part. We run the show in chapters, right? So there's an engineering chapter, there's a UX chapter, there's a Scrum chapter, there's a data science chapter. But more importantly, these guys, our guys, can apply to initiatives. They actually self-nominate them, which is vastly different to anything we usually know in global corporates. In global corporates, managers are used to assign people to projects. Here we picked an entirely different approach because we want to have the best talent on the right initiative. And of course, GitHub stars. That's their world. If you talk in a corporate about open source and GitHub stars, if for nothing else, legal and IP and security will have a good conversation with you. Two entirely different worlds. And we run central ideation and scouting support. So when we come up with new ideas, when business comes up with new ideas, the stage gate, the quality gate that we use for the many initiatives or ideas we get versus the ones we do is actually a venture capitalist style pitch deck. It's 5 slides from the problem all the way to the benefit, including obviously what resources you need. And reversely, in order to make all that work, the product owner coming from a business potentially moves to BIX for everything from 4 to 18 months, depending how large MVP and pilot is, with full dedication. And in return, he gets an entire team. 8 people for everything from 4 to 18 months. So we do substantial investments into disruption, into really digital ideas. So that's the context of BIX. A product from a technology point of view, and that's important because it also defines the interface between BIX and the more corporate world, right, and global IT. What's in scope for BIX is documented user research, the vision, the interviews. Because one of the biggest problems that happens in the scale-up when you hand over to a different team is actually you lose the product vision. You lose cadence on development and you hand over an idea, right? And the mindsets, the guys that did the original user research that went potentially an earth away to understand a user in China have to hand this over. And the only way to really successfully hand this over on the vision front is documented user research. People need to understand why something was built and not just the code that was built. That's part 1. Part 2, visual prototypes and sketches, because this is the foundation that we use for user testing. All user stories in Jira, documentation in Confluence, traceable linkage from the story to the code base, PRs and God knows what else. And importantly, a true working piece of software versus a throwaway piece. When we hand over, we have 100 users, couple clinics potentially on that thing. So it is built to scale and not built to be rebuilt. Because if you need to rebuild the entire thing, you lose time that you don't have in a scale-up. In a scale-up, you want to take 100 users you have all the way to 10,000 in months, in years, whatever. And you don't want to have a dip like this where you try to rebuild the entire thing. With all sorts of gimmicks, including automated testing, continuous integration pipelines, yada, yada, yada. And in our world, every solution needs to have a risk assessment, especially if it's connecting to services in the cloud. So there is a risk assessment that was signed to, again, ensure that you don't have to rebuild the entire piece. So that's the work we do. What's out of scope, more importantly actually, is we do not integrate sensitive BI data. Why? Because the BIX runs entirely in the cloud. We run entirely at AWS, and God forbid we get hacked. The last thing I want to see is molecules freely available, especially our core molecules. So the molecules that we work with is, for example, Coca-Cola, a fake molecule, whatever, but not our sensitive ones. Security. Interfaces to BI systems. We will not build an interface to our global S4 HANA instance. If I need to create a sales order, or if I need sales order data, I'll get the dump and move on. Because that's not the job, right? The job is to build MVPs and pilots. So prove a hypothesis and build a product around that. And trust me, building an interface when the stuff is on BI premise is a matter of days. That's not your issue. Formalized GXP testing. So GXP is good blah practice, right? Which is like the regulation that pharma goes by with, GAMP and GXP. We don't do any formalized GXP testing. Because GXP testing is actually applicable to pieces that go towards production. And if we do that and fall fully into the quality management system of GXP, then we'll just lose massive cadence in the MVP stage for no value. That goes on with formalized labor, so GUMP documentation. I told you earlier, right? We have user stories, we have the linkage to code, we have traceable unit tests, CI integration tests, so everything you need from a risk perspective. What we will not offer is any labor style documentation. That needs to happen then if you really bring something to production that is either touching a patient or that is touching manufacturing. And we also don't have to worry about ITIL config management, right? So there is no config items, no changes, no incidents, and all the other things that need very formal documentation. There's all our world in Jira, which is bugs and features and tasks. Right? So that's the scope. What's in, what's out. If you don't clarify this early, you'll have joy and fun later on. Take my word, we clarified it decently too late. After the first pieces where he said, okay, that's it. And everyone was like, and that's just it? Yeah, that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Because otherwise, we can stop working at BIX. So, to give you an idea, when we ideate centrally, we get 100 ideas roughly, 100, 200 ideas from all around the world, right? So we do a big ideation initiative, we do a big initiative across the company to have people around the theme ideate, from China all the way to Brazil. Be it how do we get stuff faster to market, be it how do we ensure that we find ideas faster or drugs faster, yada, yada, yada. Any sort of theme, right? Out of those 100, that go then weighted to the digital steering committee, which is actually the second name to the board. Now we actually deformalized this a little bit. We did, over the last 2 years, 13 MVPs, 13 minimum viable products. Out of those, 8 made it onwards to pilot, and out of those, 7 we scaled. And it's still way too many in my world. Because what you want to have is you want to have a huge idea funnel, and you pick by far the best ones that then make it. Because these are really the moonshot ideas. And just to give you 2 that we work on. One that is currently in pilot is actually the idea to diagnose dementia. So I don't know how many people are familiar with neurodegenerative diseases. I can tell you, that's nasty. My mom died last year of ALS. And take my word, these diseases are nasty. And so is dementia, right? I mean, at the very end, you sometimes, or in the final stages, you might not even recognize your husband, your mom, your kids, whatever, right? Or actually seriously get lost because you don't find home anymore. So these are pretty nasty beasts, right? And one of the things that we actively work on is to be able to diagnose that based on the way you speak, right? So that's obviously machine learning in place. There's natural language processing. There's many, many other things, right? There's the comparative models, and there is a shitload of science behind, right? Because your speech is considered to be the door to your brain. Because many of these diseases you will only see at the very last stages in an MRI cut, but you are able to potentially diagnose them way earlier if you hear people talk and speak. So we had to invent a test and not just write code, right? We had to actually work with real doctors to write real test exams on what people would have to explain and say and whatnot, right? And bake that all into an application and make it secure and make it pen tested and many other things. So apparently my headset is falling apart, so I'm sorry for that. Maybe I have to move my head a little bit less. Okay, anyway. Second part is Pharmera. Pharmera also just hit the street, and Pharmera allows actually farmers to manage their pigs much smarter, right? If you talk about large-scale farms where pigs are harvested, the actually right term would be produced, you want to ensure that that a disease is not spreading like this, right? You want to ensure that you understand how a disease may move through a population that is transmitted by winds, right? These things you want to know and you want to be able to manage. And if you look at how pigs are actually managed through caregivers, you want to give them very accurate views based on sensoric data, based on data that they can see and actually predict what's going to happen before it actually happens. Because the marge on a pig is not much. That much I can tell you as well. So, and if you lose, you don't lose one, you sometimes lose parts of the herd, right? Because the disease is spreading like this. So these are the things we're working on, right? And you see with both, Both are actually, of course, animal health and human pharma, which is our core business, but both are actually adjacent to those, right? On the left part, we talk about diagnostics, and on the right part, we talk about really going out to the farmer and helping him, not just with medicine, right, or with drugs, but also helping to manage the stuff more efficient. So maybe ideas for you guys as well. When you run an incubator, what are these guys supposed to do? Because if you go extremely extreme, then there's going to be just cultural blocks and borders to pick up the stuff. So you have to find the magic way, and that's the reason why the ideation actually is driven out of business and not out of anything else. Because we don't want to go one moonshot after the other that would disrupt the company so much that we never get a scale up done. So you have to find this magic balance. And there's no right or wrong, just a food for thought. So, global IT. 1,500 people spread around the world, 24/7 run. We run 30 production plants worldwide. So this is 24/7 production, right? Biotech production and chemical production. Everything from project managers to system analysts to network engineers. From Brazil all the way to Japan. And we turn around 200 million euros in projects every year. $200 million, right? So in a nutshell, the IT that we run at BI is $1 billion IT. It's more revenue than most companies make. Pretty big. And actually, if you think about it that way, right, hugely efficient, because otherwise that wouldn't work. Very rigid when it comes to new systems. Of course, IT has to scale. Every new system goes through the global architecture board. We just don't implement a system before you can implement that system and register it anywhere, be it in the incident management, be it in config management. It will go through the architecture board. And these guys are pretty nasty. Still not half as nasty as I want them to be, but they are pretty nasty. So we get that actually pretty neatly under control. And we run the ruthless platform strategy. So every new system goes actually one of those 6 platforms, right? Be it AWS, be it Azure, be it OpenShift, be it SAP, or be it Force.com. We have to scale. In order to keep operations like this alive, you need to scale. You need to scale knowledge, you need to scale process. If you don't have the two, a vehicle like this will largely not fly. And it's all around efficiency. Efficiency, efficiency, efficiency for commodity. We are a cost center, so we have a headcount target, and we have a cost target. So the only way to actually free up people for innovation is ruthless consolidation. And 6 years ago, we were at 4,500 systems. End of 2021, we'll be at 1,000. Ruthless strategy to consolidate. And we do it together with the vehicle of us finally transforming to be a global organization. So we come of a very international organization, and now we are transforming more and more into truly a global organization. Global platforms, global systems, where needed and where commodity, right? I mean, how many CRM systems you think you need in a company like BI, right? How many ERP systems you think you need? I can tell you, 1 CRM and 1 ERP. And that's what we do, in order to free up resource. So this is global IT. And it's a pretty well-oiled factory. And a really cool show. I have to say, I'm proud. I'm really proud. So, product teams are the lever we have to transform. And product teams are the main driver to scale. So a product team, I told you earlier, right? When you go to BIX, when you come to BIX, you get actually one team, one product team, fully staffed. Scrum Master, 2 data scientists. When you hand over, you need to rebuild potentially the entire product team somewhere in the world. Hopefully, very close to the product owner. If you don't do that, you will suffer. That much I can tell you as well. So do it as close as you can to the product owner. Even if there are neat gimmicks and technology gimmicks, like Microsoft Surface Hub, which we use and employ throughout the world, the best thing you can do is co-locate product owner and engineering, team or teams. The second best option, Surface Hub. The third best option, no, there is no third best option. So from an organizational point of view, product teams work in close proximity. Inside a product team, there is no individual spaces. So we don't have product teams where people sit in one floor, 3 people sit in another floor, and 3 other people sit in another building. They sit truly co-located. And they are also not distributed. If you want to set yourself up for decent failure, don't do this. It will cost you money, that much I can tell you. Nothing is for free, and especially that is not for free. But it will hugely benefit any sort of bootstrap. That doesn't mean that it needs to be forever that way. But in the beginning, take my word and co-locate them. Clear dedication of team members for the product. So if you run a global IT, many people are in many places at the same time. And that's nothing abnormal, right? There is context switch. There's context switch between run and project. There may be 2 projects or 3. In a product team, you don't want that. In a product team, you want to have people dedicated to the product. 80%. 20% they're on their own to do whatever they want, right? Be it GitHub contributions, be it testing, learning, whatever it is. But have them dedicated. Our big learning. You need to ring fence these guys. If you don't ring fence them, they'll be hammered by other people with tasks that are valuable to the company, but certainly not valuable to the product. Okay? Flat team structure. That's an interesting one, right? You run a global IT. Management structures, obviously. Span of control topics. And then suddenly you put a product team somewhere, right? Now, you need to actually reskill the manager that you formally put on top because you need a lever in a hierarchy to not start interfering with the product team. Managers are used to manage stuff for very good reasons. In the case of a product team, the absolute last thing you want is a manager trying to be either shadow product owner, shadow scrum master, or some other rock king that thinks he knows it all better. Take my word, all these 3 things, no good. Right? So you need to actually reskill managers that have product teams in the hierarchy underneath them to let them go. And I'm actually a big fan of then renaming the title lead or manager or whatever to actually master of impediment removement. Because that's what's important. I mean, product teams are largely self-contained, right? I mean, you need people that are able to remove impediments. And freshly hired scrum masters that know 1/10 of the organization will be 100 times as slow as a long manager in the company to remove an impediment. Because companies like this, in that size, live and die by networks. So, if you have a manager that you need to put the product underneath, tell him, your job from tomorrow on is not managing and not ensuring people do work. Your job is to remove impediments. Okay? And you need experience with the technology stack. I mean, otherwise, you hire brand new people, and suddenly your cadence just goes down like this, because they have no idea what they're supposed to do, right? It's without any other technology. So you need to find a way of how you upskill people, or use common sense. I didn't.
And all that with turning the power off. So, want me to talk without mic? Okay, I'll continue to talk without mic. Well, magic happens, hopefully or not. I don't know. We'll see. Okay.
Wir haben hier keinen Ton.
It's working again? You believe?
Please.
I said I'll not be guilty of any people losing their ability to hear, right? Just to be very clear now. Okay, very good. So back to this. So that's part 1, right? The foundation to a successful product is actually its product team. Keep this in mind. Part 2, handover process. When we hand over, we actually take people for 3 to 6 months into BIX to have them hear and feel the spirit of BIX. When we handed over to Argentina and built up an entire product team there, what we did?
Come on, guys. I'm happy to play any technology guinea pig, but maybe not in front of a presentation. Okay, very good. Back to this. So, key piece, even when we handed over to Argentina, we flew the guys from Argentina for weeks and weeks and weeks to BIX. Then we sent them back for an entire sprint, and then half of the product team went there for 2 months to work side by side with them and shadow them, just to ensure that you get the handover baked. The less money and the less time you invest in handover, the exponentially bigger chance you have to fail. And that's something we had to learn the hard way. Because we tried all sorts of different ways how to do it, right? Could we do it better remote? Could we do it in shorter amount of time? Because obviously you locked then 2 full teams, or actually 3 teams even, with 3 months of handover, 5 months of handover. Take my word, every minute you invest there is a good minute. And actually one that is hugely valuable going forward. Our learning. So, early involvement of new team in cadence and user research. Take the new team and have them be part of user research. They need to understand 0 to hero the vision and their new users. Because otherwise they just take the backlog and will become a team that just implements the backlog without even knowing what their users are. Ensure that they fully buy into that vision and into that user research. Regular review on onboarding activities and assessment of progress. That's what we do. Every 2 months there's a check-in call with the Scrum Master or with one of the lead engineers to understand if they have issues. Where are they? Is the stuff working? Do they have issues with the technology stack? Blah, blah, blah. Super important, because otherwise the frustration gets large and you'll not move. And last but not least, a dedicated IT lead for compliance topics, for infrastructure topics. And you'll see later why that's important. But keep this in mind. Don't have the core product team trying to fix their outside problems to bind itself into IT. Have a dedicated lead from IT that knows IT in and out, there to support them. Why? A little later. So, now that I've told you so much about this, right, it sounds like we have this totally under control. Well, there is unfortunately a couple things that happen every other day that you need to worry about. And that I worry about as well, by the way. First of all, new frameworks and technologies emerge every day, right? That's cool if you're a startup. If you want to scale in a global IT organization where you want to scale around knowledge and pools of knowledge, introducing with every MVP 3 new programming languages, 5 new concepts, take my word, not going to work. So, standardize early on a few technologies that will cover the 80+%. And we did this as part of the development stack to standardize on JavaScript in the front end with frameworks, little left, little right, largely React and Vue and Angular, and on the backend side on a couple of normal, solid programming languages. In our world, it's Java and Spring, it's Python for the data science world, Scala to crunch data, and Node.js. That's it. 4. Of course, people are free to use libraries, plugins, and God knows what, and they emerge hugely fast right now, especially on the data science side. But standardize on those, because you will skill people around programming languages, and then they move from there. If you come, the next MVP is based on Kotlin, and the third one is based on, I don't know, Ecstasy right now, which actually seems to grasp also some grounds. Don't do it, because it will kill scaling factors. Our view. People attraction. If you're a startup and you tell people you can go and work whenever you want there, you can work from home, wear shorts to work, and there's also all sorts of gimmicks and perks, versus corporate, right? You need to rethink the way you sell a corporate IT or a global IT. Because you want to make the IT equally attractive than a startup. Because otherwise, you may have rock stars in the incubator, and you don't have rock stars at the teams that take over, which is exactly the good, solid way of killing your product. So you need to actually rethink your hiring practices in IT. We did that. You have to rethink the brand of the company. We did that, as painful as it was. And it took actually more than a year to change the way we hire. And to have rapid turnarounds, right, on hiring. And not 3, 6, some weeks, but rather a day, right? The guy was there for the interview. A day, maximum 3 days later, he gets, yep, we take you or not. Rapid turnaround. These are the things you need to change on the IT side. Keep this in mind. Because there is a war for talent. Skill management. Broad versus deep, right? Many cases in global ITs, you have broad knowledge. In a product team, you need deep knowledge. Very deep knowledge. Something you need to account for. And we'll talk about that, what we did later. Potential regulations. GAMP, ISO, MDR, so software as medical device. These are things you need to worry on both sides. Because there's a couple things you need to actually ensure, even in the MVP, to then not have to redo it in the pilot or scale. And more regulations want to see the entire cycle of exploratory all the way to product. But do not over-engineer it on the MVP side. Otherwise, you will kill innovation. MVP, throwaway, right? Many people think an MVP is a throwaway piece, a prototype. I can tell you it's not. If you want to create throwaway code, enjoy trying to scale this. Not going to work. So you need to actually accept technical debt to scale up or to be fast versus not too much technical debt to scale up. Be aware. Yeah, right, MacBooks. So global ITs tend to run pretty solid locked down boxes. And what you can get is actually one like this that has 10 admin rights. But these are not full admin rights for various very well good reasons. Because the last thing you want to be is actually stripped down by a virus that actually then harms your production. Which actually happened the last couple of years if you just open the newspaper, right? There were pretty neat ransomwares that actually did some solid destruction, right? And actually ensured that one of our competitors couldn't produce for more than a week. So there's good reasons for this. On the other side, in the incubator, I mean, engineers will tell you the first thing I want is a MacBook with full admin access. And if I don't get it, I don't come. So you need to find ways to make those worlds fit together, right? I can tell you, start thinking about, at least for a small group of people, how you want to manage MacBooks in a global IT. If you have not done it until now. What most people think is that incubators like BIX are about tree hugging, or yoga, or kumbaya, or anything in between. And yeah, to some extent they are. Because that's part of the culture. And if you look to Google and what Sergey said, bring yourself to work, Montessori by the way, yep, that's what you get. And that's okay. Because on the other side, you run Scrum. And Scrum is a pretty badass rigor. I mean, you have to ship potentially daily. If for nothing else, your release is due at the end of the sprint. You go production 2 weeks after the first line of code. So it's actually a pretty neat rigor. Use this as a selling argument. If people tell you, yeah, you startup guys, they anyway do more yoga and tree hugging. It's pretty hard rigor, if done right. And ITIL, also something to worry about, right? Config management, incidents, changes. You have 3 times the same incident, you're about to create a problem, follow up on blah, blah, blah. If you do this to the incubator, Jesus Christ, you'll have fun. Alone. Because the rest of the guys will likely just move. So, do not try to introduce processes like ITIL into an incubator. Not going to work. So, now that I've talked to you guys so much about the problems or challenges or opportunities, in Neudeutsch. Let's talk about what we did. So there's two pieces. One is around technology and one is around culture. And here they are. At least for us, they work. The trick is actually BIX uses and co-develops core IT services. And core IT services can be threefold, right? One is the physical migration of a product, right? Which is source code, Git repos, user stories, user research, blah, blah, blah. Here it's very simple. It's two identical stacks. So we run two identical technology stacks. One is fully qualified, fully validated at BI soil, and one is for the incubator. The incubator is usually a release or so ahead with new plugins, blah, blah, blah. Use them as research lab. Hugely powerful, because with that, you can migrate, and you can technology migrate like this. When we migrate, the entire package, including full runtime and data, is half an hour of work. We migrate the entire configuration, if built right, fully automated. If you want to allow the incubator to use, I don't know what, Google Cloud, and you think VMs on-premise are the right thing to do for various good reasons, I can also tell you, you will have joint fun trying to migrate. Use the same. Sounds super obvious. I've seen so many companies not doing it, or putting in so much rigor around the incubator that it's not going to work. So you have to find ways of where you keep similarity and where you let freedom happen. And that's a balance, depending on the company. So this is easy, right? Idem per idem, one for the other. Second part, service migration. I told you there's a couple things that BIX will not do, right? For example, not build interfaces, right? They take a file dump and suck it in via Python, or build a quick and dirty REST interface to some development system that is in the cloud, and that's it. Those you need to rebuild. Be aware and start early with any demands you kick into the IT funnel to get them built. Because you want to get them built as quick as you potentially can if you want to scale the product. So here you need to invest time to rebuild. Plan it and it's going to work. We have seen that. Same thing happens, right? At BIX we use largely Atlassian Crowd and OAuth of OpenShift for any authentication. Well, if you run a global IT and a global company with 100,000 people, there is CM processes in place, there's usually an Active Directory in place, and there's many other things in place. Those things you need to think early about, because otherwise you get stuck during the migration, and you get stuck during scale-up. And last but not least, truly new service development. And here we co-design both worlds. So both worlds, be it IT infrastructure, IT enabling services, ITX, and BIX, truly co-design new services. Be it around video conferencing, video chat, semantic integration. The prototype of that was done at BIX. And now it's actually a global service that everyone can leverage at BI, right? UX design was actually given birth at BIX, and all the method and stack was piloted at BIX and is now fully supported by IT. So here is actually your first big lever to truly work together and not have two competing cultures or two competing groups of people. Because that's the last thing you want. You don't want to have either people from the incubator being hell ignorant or hell arrogant towards the global IT, or vice versa. The more culture conflict you have, the more impossible is a good handover. And we learned that as well. And last but not least, one development stack and security and penetration testing provided by IT. So we use global services by IT. Every product that BIX ships is pen tested by SISOC globally, except the exact same rules, and we actually help to develop SISOC even further every day with new rules, new thoughts, new continuous integration. And the other part that we do is we use one development stack. And we actually open source that development stack. And I'll talk why we did it that way a couple slides from now. One development stack. Not 3, not 4, not 5, 1. Whichever one you pick, 1. So, why did we think it was a smart idea to do our own development stack? Right? There is, if you take a look at the sponsors here, no matter to which sponsor you go, they will tell you we have it all, just use it. Well, I can tell you, there was two things we needed. For one, we had 20,000 users on Atlassian, so Atlassian was given. And we wanted to generate documentation, fully automated at the very end, and put all sorts of governance in between to be able to scale up. And that was just not available. So we decided to build this one thin layer, and it's really just a thin layer that we call the development stack ourselves, in order to make that possible. Because that is part of our transformation. You want people in IT to also be able to build again. And not just build features, but also build platform. I said, we want to transform IT into an engineering house where needed. The best engineering houses I've seen in my career, and that I had the pleasure to work with or at, were those that had to do both, features and platform. And that's the reason why we decided to do it that way. And of course, it's on GitHub. People can contribute, people can shout against it, people can challenge it, and that's actually something that people should get used to. That people see quality publicly on the internet. And of course, it's giving our engineers a good way to bring Kubernetes forward and also OpenShift. Because both is what we are using, and for every bug we find in the Open Dev stack, we actually find a couple more either on OpenShift or on Kubernetes. And that's good that way. Because it will bring Kubernetes forward. And we have a track record of open sourcing molecules at BI. We are one of the very few pharma companies that open source molecules under opnme.com, by the way. We also want to get a track record that we produce cutting-edge open source software. That's part of the branding. You want to attract top talent. And top talent today is visible through two things. Open source contributions, and be it Kununu or be it Glassdoor. And third is actually speaking at conferences. Sure, this is brand building. Soft factors, pretty important. I had plenty of people that ask me, can I go to conferences, can I speak at conferences, and can I contribute open source code? Without having legal sitting in my back. So, how many global ITs can say yes to all three of them? This is the new world, if you want to scale product teams. Good. In a nutshell, we use the development stack and product teams to transform. Last part. People. It's about people. And I cannot say this often enough. It's a very complicated picture because I actually of a larger presentation I gave on chapters. So left is the incubator BIX, and right is IT with schematically products in marketing and sales and research development and medicine, right? And what you want to establish is chapters. So we establish chapters across BIX and the product teams in IT with a vision to at some point have truly liquid resource pools. So when we staff the next products, at some point hopefully we'll be able to get the resources no matter where they physically sit. Do they sit in IT? Do they sit in BIX? I could care less. But in order to make something like this happen, you need to ensure that you have a vehicle to that. To grow people, to have development plans, to have them doing something valuable for the chapter. So the only way we could see it to work is actually through chapters. So, chapter leads across IT and BIX. So no matter where they come from, you will need to think about something like a second career path, if you like it or not, that most global ITs don't have, right? Because the best engineers in a global IT are supposed to get managers. I know plenty of rock star engineers, and the last thing those guys want is to become people manager and sign contracts or sign Urlaubsanträge. But what they want is to write code. So you need to figure out a way of how do you do a second career path. If you don't, good luck in growing people. We run an academy concept, pretty successful, that was originally designed by BIX. That's a week long where we invite people, where we know that they want to become engineers or are already engineers, maybe at the junior level or intermediate level, to hack 1 week with them, build something, build actually a real application on the development stack to really spread the message. We run a large Microsoft Teams community. We run chapter surveys and whatnot, and gradually it's actually getting larger and larger into IT. So we are on the horizon there and on the way. It's not done yet, but that's actually what we are already implementing now. And then let magic happen. It's people. I mean, there's so much you can put in, and so much work you can put in, and so much process you can put in. At the very end, if they find meaningful work, and if they like to contribute, it's gonna fly. So pick people for your chapter, or that are supposed to run your chapter, that are actually outgoing, that like to chat and like to share. If you pick people that are introverted like hell, don't share knowledge, not going to work either. Those you need to find a smart place for where they can contribute a hell lot of value. But likely it's not going to be to run your academy concept. Good. So, what have we learned in the last 2.5 years? Seamless transfers of MVP and pilots to IT is a must. If you need to change a gazillion lines of code in between, need to rebuild it, need to build compliance about it, you will lose cadence, you'll lose customers. I'll leave it to you which direction you want to pick, but that should be the goal. Yeah, do it yourself. Build management on 2 streets is also not good, right? Because if you take over software and you can't build it for 5 days, I'm sure this will create a shitload of excitement on the team that takes over the product. Invest in skills super early, especially on the IT side, because the deep IT skills, the deep engineering skills in many places were actually outsourced and offshored over the last couple of years. I know many companies that have extremely successfully outsourced half their engineering and kept program managers and business analysts, right? For various good reasons, by the way. On the other side, now it's time to get them back and build it up. Compliance, Jira and many other pieces, right? Or software chunks like GitLab and whatnot offer you to run stuff integrated. Do it. The last thing you need is that engineers that take over the product don't find their way back on why something was built. You lose time and you create frustration. OpenShift and AWS are super cool as toolboxes. Seriously. But that's about it. If you take a look into your brand new OKD 4X or at AWS, you have a catalog like this of very interesting images. Some pass security scanning, others don't. Fine. And then people are on their own. Is this what you really want for an incubator or for a global IT to scale? No. That much I can tell you. So standardize on the services you want to use. Standardize the way you want to run CI, which tools that you run on CI, and even to some extent to the pipeline structure. What tools are you using for dependency scanning? We use Snike, for example. That works super well. We use SonarQube, and you get the pipeline as part of the code base. You literally are on the other cluster, say start build, and off you go. The thing will build. Governance on both sides helps. So if you have people like me, I'm not sure how much good I do. On the other side, I think I do something good, because I keep and try to balance both governance sides. Because there's also governance you need to do in the incubator, if you like it or not. So we have architecture critiques in the incubator, for example. Many other things, right? So keep people that actually know both worlds very, very well. The more of those you have, the less friction you will have culture-wise. And if for nothing else, I guess I try to be a good citizen of both worlds. Governance on both sides helps standardize on technology and not on the framework. Because frameworks come and go. Standardize on the languages that are proven standard. Because those you can scale knowledge-wise. And last but not least, platforms and development process, right? For us, Open DevStack is the common denominator to make it work. For other companies, it's maybe other things. But use one development stack and one development method. Otherwise, you will have joy and fun trying to hand over a product or scale up successfully. And with that, thank you very much.